Welcome everyone to another amazing episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. That intro was pretty good. I'll give you guys props for that. That was pretty good. The cool thing is right now we're actually camping, backcountry camping, and the lake right now is calm. There's not a sound out here except the crackling fire and that crazy sound of Adam and Ben from Paddleheads echoing across the whole lake. That was pretty impressive. What do you think, Andrew?
It was a thing.
So like we mentioned, this week we're actually backcountry camping, our annual Paddleheads walleye fishing trip up in a redacted area. We're not going to tell you where because it's a pretty nice lake. So how's it going, Adam? How's it going, Ben?
Going good.
Oh, it's excellent, yeah.
Just for anyone, because no one can see this, we have a mic attached to a spatula right now. That's what we're working with here.
Yeah.
But we're going to make it work.
I brought out my inner SpongeBob, so it's going to work. So we have, before we start our conversation with Adam and Ben from Paddleheads, we have, as tradition states, an interesting fishing fact. And to handle that, we have the man with the mustache and the beard now, Andrew.
Well, I thought I'd talk a little bit about something that happened to us as we came into this lake. So this back lake, we have to portage in a little bit. I was standing in the water. We're lifting the canoe over a beaver dam. And all of a sudden, I lost my footing. The canoe slammed down on top of a rock. Left some big paint chips. It's fine. No leak sprung, but felt pretty bad about that. But it got me thinking of different things that can hurt a boat. So, like, I know we've all seen, driving around on a lake and you see, like, the bottom half of a motor and you just know that guy had a terrible day. Didn't even bother trying to salvage the scrap. But what are some things that have damaged boats that maybe you might not think of as dangers? Yes, avoiding deadheads as you're driving up a river or, in a tinner like I do. I've bumped a couple of those myself. But what are some things, I'll ask Adam there. Is there anything else that you think could damage a boat besides just, let's say, running into an obstruction?
Oh, well, I was going to say an iceberg. I hear they're not great.
Too soon.
It's only been more than 100 years.
Yeah, I know Jesse's hurt his canoe by running over the strap that held it down that kind of kinked it on top of his roof racks. I've seen that happen. My boat, when I first got it, it had two huge gashes because I think the last owner tried to just fire it onto a boat trailer and just sent those two running boards right through the hull. Do you have something there, Adam? You have thought about it?
Apologize for my alarm there, folks. Just ignore that.
Did you have something else that would damage a boat, Adam?
Yeah, ratchet straps.
Yeah.
I learned that the hard way with my canoe, attaching it to the car. And just, want to make sure it's not going to fall off, right? So you just reef on it. I now have some like really weird warps in my canoe as a result, so that might do it. I feel like they make it go faster, but...
Yeah. So these are all some great words to the wise of, put some thought into when you're doing things so these things don't happen. Now, I wanted to talk about this subject because I came across something that can damage boats and has been doing so not so much in more recent years, but for sure in the past was a huge issue on seafaring vessels. And I had no idea about these things before. They're called shipworms. Have you ever heard of shipworms? They're a type of mussel, like a mollusk, that you normally think of a mussel or a mollusk and it's like in a shell. These things aren't in their shell. They have two hard shells right in front of their head that act as basically a drill bit. And they will drill into the wood of a ship. They're the termites of the sea is what they're called. And these things can go up to like a foot long. And they're actually a delicacy. People love eating them. And if you look up videos of shipworm, these people pull out like an old rotten stump, like what you might find floating in your local lake and whatnot. And what we might think, that might hold a crayfish or something. They cut it in half, slam it on a rock, and like 15 of these huge white worms slide out of it. And they're like, next best thought, delicious. I should eat this. So I just wanted to say, there's a lot of things that can damage your boat, but I want to be thankful for the fact that shipworms are only in salt water. And also that I have an aluminum boat.
I don't know what to say, Andrew, except I thought shipworms was something you got after you ate Taco Bell. So anyway, we're here again, like I said, with Paddleheads, and we have Adam and Ben. Why don't you give our listeners, I'm sure most of the people that listen to this podcast know who you guys are, but in case there's someone living under a rock, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, we're Paddleheads. My name is Ben and Adam here. We started with our own YouTube channels originally and joined forces a couple years ago, and we do adventure fishing. That's what we like to call it, at least. It's the easiest way to say what we do. We just like to fish more of the back lakes. We love fishing out of canoes and kayaks. We like the adventure as much as we like, well, I think we like the fishing more than the adventure sometimes, but we like the adventure almost as equally as we like the fishing.
I agree with that. We love portaging too.
Oh yeah.
Love portaging. Carrying 100 pounds.
I've
over
never
2
heard anyone
kilometers.
say that in their life.
No.
Except maybe Royce.
Radio voice Royce. I love portaging. He hates it.
We don't. We like the results of portaging. We
Yes.
like where we can get from portaging. We definitely complain about the portage.
It was funny. We were actually talking about portaging earlier when me and Andrew were out fishing, and I was like, man, we should do just like a really terrible, brutal portage just so that we can say that we did it. And he's like, what did you say?
I said, portages are there's such a great story afterwards, but they're so miserable during it.
Like a typical camping trip this week, I think the last 2 times we came on this annual trip, and this is the 3rd trip, it has rained every single time. Mm-hmm. The first time we came, it poured rain. The second time, it poured rain. And today, it poured rain.
And also a cold front accompanies all of those things.
Yes. But let's just go into maybe a little bit about this trip so far. So we're doing our walleye trip. We're backcountry camping. It's a little bit of an adventure to get to this lake. Why don't you describe a little bit about that? You don't have to give us GPS locations because that, I'll bleep it out anyway.
Beep, beep, beep. The swamp, I think, is the thing that really sets this place apart, especially when you come later in the year. You've got about, an hour of paddling through a pretty thick swamp, and the deer flies are relentless. It's also very entertaining because there's millions of frogs, and I've been here with my kids before, and it's very entertaining for them as I'm like, we're almost there, guys. They're, jumping out of the boat. But once you get through the swamp, it opens up into this gorgeous lake that we've had great success with in the past, fishing for walleye and smallmouth bass. Not smallies this trip because 2 weekends from now? I don't know when this episode's coming out, but yeah, it's a gorgeous lake. It's quiet right now. It is literally glass. I'm looking at it, but it's a nice spot to come and enjoy this kind of thing, right? Sitting around the fire, hanging out with buddies, and fishing really is what it's actually about.
And when Adam is talking about paddling through a swamp, like we've come here either for walleye opener or bass opener, and there are times like we run the trolling motor or we have the gas motor and we plow through because Jesse and I are lazy, but we at this time of year, even in the spring, the weeds are so thick sometimes. You can see they're going to grow up. And in the summer, I can't imagine how thick the weeds are. Like you're paddling through slop. Like an hour-long paddle is a lot of work for anyone. And then the whole time, like if you're paddling canoe through water, you do a couple strokes and you can coast for 4 times as long as what you actually paddled for. If you're in weeds, as soon as your paddle's out of the water, that canoe stops, and you're like, well, time to push again. And you're just like, it's a slog to get through, and then you're over a beaver dam and.
So a little trick to get through the weeds like that is actually with 2 canoe paddles, like you're skiing. You put one on each side of the canoe and you just push through. It's a good way to do it.
I'm pretty sure I saw James Bond do that.
It works. I can vouch.
So when it comes to camping, I'm sure most people listening have gone camping before. I hope they have gone camping to some extent. A lot of people go car camping or provincial park camping, which is great, especially if you just like fishing, you want to fish the lake. What would you say are the advantages when it comes to fishing to go backcountry camping as opposed to fishing a provincial park?
Well, you really get away from a lot of the fishing pressure. A lot of these front country lakes, like the car camping lakes, you can launch a boat in those lakes. So, they're not just fished by the people who are camping there. They're also fished by any of the locals, any of the weekend warriors that are hitting that lake. So by going backcountry, you get away from a lot of the fishing pressure. You hit these lakes that, could be holding more giants. The water's typically cleaner, so it's not contaminated with pollutants from people fertilizing their grass or fertilizing their farm and then having that runoff go into the water, because that definitely affects the fishing, the bait fish, and the whole food chain. When you get in these back lakes, they're so pristine, so natural, very much untouched. And the fishing is just, it seems to be better, at least for us. And the environment that you're in as well, at the end of the day, if you do get skunked, at least you got skunked in this absolutely gorgeous place, away from all the motorboats, no jet skis.
That's what we tell ourselves, right?
Yes.
Oh, at least it's beautiful here.
Yeah, at least it's beautiful.
It's crazy, these lakes, and that's part of the reason why I love it too, is because, like you were saying, like when you talk about backcountry lakes like the one we're on now, you might see like some random canoes kicking around. People have left here, they're gonna come. People will come here. They've been coming here for probably years, but no one lives on this lake. There is no boat launch on this lake. So as soon as you eliminate that, like you were saying, the chances of you even seeing another person is slim. I know, like if you can do backcountry, like in Algonquin Park, let's say, and you can portage 5 lakes deep, and yeah, you might still see people because it is a marked trail of where to go and stuff like that. But if you can find some of these gems where you can have like proper, I'm not saying break into places, you have proper legal access, there's crown land access or something, but it's not posted with all these nice sites and all this stuff. If you can make the effort and get into a place like this, it is completely different than to anything else you may have experienced before.
Yeah, and that's not to say that you can have that kind of experience in a provincial park. Like we were in Algonquin last weekend, and we went deep, and we saw nobody. So, there's things you've got to do, there's things you've got to know, and all that information, thankfully, is available on the internet and in books and through people. This spot specifically, Crownland, but even in some of the provincial parks, yeah, you don't actually have to go that far to get away from people. Like, that's kind of what we're looking for. I think we've said that before, but, one of the things we like to do is to, we don't like people that much, and that's not really true. We love
people. Suck.
That's right. We like fish more, that's all. And so, yeah, it's quiet here, it's nice, and we can just fish, and that's what we're here for.
I was just enjoying the silence of the lake. See what I did there? I'll have to say, though, like you said, there's something special about being on a lake where there's no one else on it.
Definitely.
And it's completely quiet. You don't have a care in the world. I'm not like, oh, I got to unhook the GPS on my boat because someone's going to steal it. There's no one here. There's something cool about that. I absolutely love it. So if you're just getting into backcountry camping, we're talking to maybe someone who's never done this. What are some basic tips you'd give to someone for finding places? I know you kind of got into that about like there's information out there, but what are some tips on finding places and basic equipment that you might need to just get into it? That's a big question.
Yeah.
A love of the outdoors.
Hey, that's actually a great place to start. You kind of have to want to do it.
Yeah.
Because
you need to want it.
yeah, you kind of have to want to do it. And there's lots of reasons why someone might. I'm sure we all have our own reasons here why we want to do it.
I think the best resource, like what we use, is YouTube. I mean, we don't just post there because we want to share everything there. It's where we actually go to find to learn everything too. We've learned a lot through YouTube, learned a lot through just camping with other friends. I think the best way to try and get started is to try and find a friend who's already doing it. But that's certainly not accessible for everybody. So the next best thing is to try and find a friend who wants to do it. Because if you're going into this alone by yourself, it is safer if you can go with somebody else. Mm-hmm. It's always safer in numbers.
Well, so here, maybe this will help. How did you get into it, Ben?
I got into it through an ex-girlfriend.
Tell us about her. Just kidding.
So I had an ex-girlfriend, who was an instructor at Gould Lake. So she actually taught kids about camping outdoors. So I was very fortunate that way.
And you wanted to impress her.
Yes.
And one thing led to another, and now he's in the backcountry with a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, it's a quick downhill ride.
But the amazing thing is, like YouTube, but just the internet generally, there are communities of people, and I find more and more these days people are willing to talk and to share and to help. So maybe you don't know someone who wants to do this or is willing to do this with you. Carefully, obviously, you go to the not sketchy places of the internet to find these people, but I found some of my best friends on the internet. And no, Paddleheads does not advise finding friends on the internet. But
What chat room are you guys on?
we'll tell you after the show. But yeah, there's all kinds of resources. Learn, talk to people. People will want to help. You kind of want to go with somebody, I'd say, first. If you're just starting, you don't. Yeah, maybe you do, but I wouldn't recommend someone just get out there by themselves and try this thing.
But if you really had no choice, there are parks that you can go to. And you can start small. Start with car camping. Go car camping so you're not too far from your next neighbor if anything does go wrong. You're not far from your car if anything goes wrong. You can hop in your car and just take off down the road.
Or a walk-in site too. That way you're not across on a boat and stuff like that. If you're nervous about being in a small craft, you can do a walk-in site where you have to hike everything in from your car. So it's teaching you to pack a little bit lighter. But at the same time, you can easily walk back to your car in a matter of a few minutes to get somewhere if you had to.
Yeah, I really cut my teeth in Frontenac Park. That park is a little bit unique for backcountry camping. Most provincial parks, when you go backcountry camping, the campsites are pretty spread out throughout the whole lake, and you're not usually guaranteed that there's going to be other people on the lake. But with Frontenac Park, every site, except for a couple new ones, every site's a cluster. So there's actually like 3 or 4 other campsites, and you're kind of within shouting distance. It's one of the downfalls of Frontenac Park, but it's also one of the bonuses of Frontenac Park. If you want to go solo camping, you're not going to be completely alone if you're going on, a more popular weekend or even any time during the summer. It's a great park to get started with, Frontenac Park. But there are options if you do need to go alone. Start small, do one night, make it easy for yourself.
So speaking of gear, what if we just do like a couple rounds of us each naming one object that we're not going to go over all the gear that's needed to go backcountry camping, but what's something that jumps out of your mind as something that's important to bring with you? Besides canoe to get through the water, life jacket, that stuff's fine. But for me...
I was going to say canoe. Thanks.
For me, the biggest thing is rope. Rope is a great thing to have to string up your food, something like that.
For sure. I think something that's easy to go to is just dry bags. Having dry bags of different sizes just to keep your things dry, You can't rely on your main pack for being absolutely waterproof 100% of the time. Sometimes you're unpacking and you're unpacking in the rain. You got to keep your other stuff dry. So get your sleeping bag in a dry pack and get your change of clothes in a dry pack. I think that will at least assure that you're going to have a good time if things go a little bit awry.
One thing, my precious. I don't watch movies. I only know that because I heard Andrew do it. I might have to. I might. Yeah, I was. I was thinking a tarp. That's a great option. There's so many things. I don't know, Jesse. Do you have something first? Let me think about it.
I was actually thinking tarp. I was thinking just in general. Like I was gonna kind of go over like the difference between a tent and a hammock. But either way, a tarp is a great thing to have because, like we said, this is our 3rd annual trip, and it's rained every single time. I don't know if it's just like a curse with me and Andrew, but every camping trip we've had in the last, I'd say 2-3 years, it has rained every single time for at least one day. And the worst thing about camping is if you're wet and miserable. That's the worst thing, especially in spring and fall when it's damp and things don't dry out. You don't want, like Ben said, your clothes need to be dry. They need to be in a dry bag or a barrel. And your tent or your hammock, you don't want that getting wet. So you should have a tarp because I guarantee you it's probably going to rain when you go.
And that actually leads perfectly into, I think, the thing that I would recommend people bring, something that's important. That would be an appropriately rated sleeping bag. Because if all else fails, if you have a dry, warm sleeping bag to sleep in at night, everything will be fine. But I have been really cold before. Late spring, you go out, it's like 25 degrees during the day, and you think everything's fine. And you get in your sleeping bag, and it's not warm enough. It's miserable going to sleep cold. So an appropriately rated sleeping bag.
A quick story time about that. I had, I don't know what happened. I I've lost my good sleeping bag. It's like minus 10 rated, which it's not really for minus 10, but in spring temperatures and stuff, it's great. I went camping early spring trout. It was May. I went with my brother, and the lake was overbooked in a provincial park. Don't know how that happened. People just go, or they book other lakes, and they just go to the one they want anyways because the sites are full. So anyways, every single site in this lake was full. So we had to make our own, and it was a pain. It was a pain to do it, and I had to get the tent set up. And I realized after we've portaged 2 lakes back in, I left my jacket in the car. So all I had with me, because again, we're packing light, we're portaging everything in. So I had an extra set of pants. I would bring basically 1 extra set of clothes. But I don't bring a whole second jacket. So I had 2 flannel shirts. So I had both of those on. I had 2 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of socks. I put my second set of underwear on. I had
On his head.
I put on I didn't even have a hoodie, nothing. And I put on my life jacket. I was trying to get anything I could wear to stay warm. And like I said, I didn't have my good sleeping bag. I was borrowing like a plus 5 degree summer sleeping bag. And it was like the cold. We were camping in a tent, and we had the small little air pads, and it was still, the cold was creeping into my back. Like it was, I barely got any sleep. It was miserable. So that's a good tip of, if you can be warm when you're sleeping, that you can look back on that trip and be like, that was an adventure. If it was absolutely miserable, you're going to hate that trip. Like even the stories about it, you're going to hate telling. But if you can, survive it and be unscathed, and you're going to have an adventure, even if at the time you're like, oh, it's terrible. It's raining the whole time. It was this. If you're going to go back and you tell your friends like, oh, we went camping and it was pouring rain and we had to set up tarps and it took us 4 hours to get a fire, but we finally got it going. Like those are stories you can still look back on with happiness after the fact. But if you spent a miserable night, you never look back and then be like, haha, that was funny. You're like, no, that sucks.
And if I can just say on that, the story you just shared is a perfect example of like what makes this kind of thing awesome. Is we're in this space that is unpredictable. Literally anything could happen, and it has time and time again. And the result almost always is like you leave with these like really awesome stories. And not just, you can get those same stories, when you're fishing on your friend's nice bass boat. Oh, we hooked this 25-pound bass. Yeah, okay.
What?
What lakes are you fishing again?
It's a world record.
But the stories, the fun times, the memories, and to be able to, like, for me, to bring my kids to these places and have them experience that sort of thing also is something I do think that more people should try. You never know till you try, and it's definitely worth it. So I would say thanks for your story, and that I got nothing.
I think one more thing I would add, kind of in the envelope of packing to be comfortable, obviously, and safe, would be bug spray. Mm-hmm. Bug spray is like your friend. Like if I forgot bug spray, I would just go home. Sometimes, especially at certain times of the year, the bugs are so brutally bad. Like they can be bad at provincial parks, but backcountry, they're different. They're different bugs. It's like they're on steroids. They're evil. They're huge.
They don't care about your thermocell.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care about bug spray. But you need bug spray, 100%.
So on top of the bug spray, like you said, sometimes they don't care about bug spray. And that's why I love these bug jackets. It's like a screened kind of jacket. It's all mesh. It has a hood that's complete. It zips up. No bugs are getting in. And that's my favorite line of defense. Because you also don't end up smelling like bug spray. You don't get bug spray on your fishing baits. Because that's something I'm trying to be concerned of. I don't know if the fish can smell that or if they can notice if there's like bug spray and sun lotion.
Ben, don't blame your bad luck on bug spray, okay?
Something else that I mentioned as well is right now we're sitting around a fire, and that's again one of the highlights of camping. Whether you're car camping, whether you're interior, doesn't matter. The fire is great. Everyone loves it, even if they just have a cottage or they go to an Airbnb and they have a fire pit or a wood stove inside the house. But always, what I would recommend for anyone going camping is bring multiple ways to start a fire, because you're going to bring that one lighter and you're going to realize, oh, the flint is either wet or the flint broke and fell out of this lighter, or it's out of gas, or oh, my matches got wet. So we bring lighters. I have a In my bag, I've got a double Ziploc baggie of matches so that they're waterproof, even if like the boat flips or something. A ferro rod or something if you want to get really survival into it. But bring multiple ways to start a fire. Bring tools that you are comfortable with using to collect firewood. You don't want to get an injury out there, so make sure you're comfortable. If you don't like axes, buy a nice little saw and just saw everything. That's fine. That's great. That way, again, if you are able to make yourself fire, not only is it a big survival tip if the worst was to take place, but it's also one of the most enjoyable things about backcountry camping.
And you can use it to cook the fish that you caught in the lake that day.
That's a good segue. I thought we could, because this is a fishing podcast, I thought we could get more into the fishing side of the fishing podcast.
I guess that makes sense.
So I highly recommend, we'll put the links below in the bio or the show notes. Check out Paddleheads' YouTube account because they have lots of videos where they go fishing. A lot of the accounts where they're like, musky fishing, pike fishing, walleye fishing, all different kinds of backcountry fishing. And they will show you what kind of gear they're using, tips to help catch fish in these back lakes. I thought we could talk a bit about fishing in back lakes and generally in Ontario. We're going to focus more on this lake, not particularly this particular month that we fish, but let's talk about this lake in general, walleye and smallmouth bass. So say you're backcountry camping in Ontario, where we are for smallmouth bass and walleye fishing. Let's start off with lures. Like what kind of lures? And again, you're probably packing not a lot. I know we packed a lot, but if you could only bring one tray of baits and lures, what are you going to do? What are you going to bring?
We often do that when we're doing backcountry trips, especially for portaging. We'll just try and pack everything into one tray.
But spinners.
Yeah. Inline spinners for sure.
Yeah, search baits are a big thing. When you're hitting new lakes that you don't know much about, you really want the search baits, crankbaits, spinner baits, inline spinners, stuff that you can cover a lot of water. And the more efficiently you can cover that water, the better. The different depths. Spinner baits, you can fish at different depths. Yeah, search baits are very important. But then you still need those baits to slow things down when you do find where the fish may be, or if you're just not getting hit on the search baits.
The thing that I've found, and when I first started fishing, you're on YouTube and you watch this channel and that channel. Oh, you need this. No, and you have all these baits all of a sudden. You're like, wow, I don't use half of them. But the more I do this, the more I go to like the staples for these kinds of trips, like the tried, tested, and true baits, the inline spinners, spoons, worms, the more simple, the better. And actually, when you do that, like one of the nice things about a lake like this is it's not that pressured. So you don't always have to get really finesse and like there's a bit of forgiveness here. So you can actually be really versatile with some of the baits that you have. Like for walleye, for example, I brought bottom bouncers, but with that, I can use spoons, I can use inlines, I can use like shallow diving crankbaits. There's a few different things. So if you can think about your tackle tray and imagine what you can do the most with, that's probably like a general tip that I would give to people. Use baits that are versatile, right? Things you can work deep, shallow, mid-column, always need a top water. And then something with like, if all else is failing, like if you're on a bass lake like this, have some wacky worms and I think you'll be fine.
I think for me, if I had to narrow it down to a few baits that I would always bring, if I had to bring, like Jesse said, one tray. One of the big things if I'm going back like camping, where especially if you're portaging in, you don't have a motorboat where you're going anywhere fast, we like to take our time and troll. You're going to be paddling, slow, so maybe go half a kilometer slower than you can at full speed, and now you're trolling speed. And so having like trolling spinners, effective, yes, but can cause a lot of line twist, so it's not something that I prefer to do. But if you have crankbaits that can run at various depths, and they always will run about up to maybe twice as deep what they're rated if you're trolling, because it's one super long constant retrieve. It's not like you cast it out 40 feet and reeled it in and, it's designed to go to 6 feet. If you're trolling it, that could very easily go to 12 feet almost, 10 feet, if you're trolling that thing. So if you have a few different crankbaits that control at different depths, that way as you're going, if you are having fishing on your camping event, the entire travel in and out, when you're in the water, you could be fishing and potentially catching stuff, which is it's always exciting when the rod between your legs starts, going off, and you're like, oh, there we go, got a bass on, or a walleye, or a big pike, or lake trout, or something. So all those things, having a few baits that you can troll with is always something that I bring with me backcountry.
I totally agree. And that's something that's changed a lot for us because we often will do like multi-day trips. So we're moving between campsites and we have like a destination. So we're moving A to B. There's a lot of travel involved. And sometimes we're doing big, long trips. And so you have to move because if you don't, you're not going to make it to your campsite before dark. And well, it sucks setting up at night. So yeah, trolling is an effective way to like fish while you're doing the other things you've got to do. And, a quick little interruption by, I don't know, how big was that pike in Frontenac Park that I caught when we were trolling? I don't know, it was nice. It was fat. It wasn't so long, but it was a chunky one. And who doesn't want a big fat pike on the end of their line while they're on their way to their campsite? I do.
Maybe right now we could just give a little shout out to one of our friends, Jeff at Limestone Lures. If you were looking through Limestone Lures' website, there's a few baits that he makes that I think are absolutely fantastic to bring on lakes like this. And like you said, fish on these lakes are generally pretty stupid. They don't see a lot. Again, there's not a lot of people that fish this lake, so they're not super pressured. Like you said, the classic baits are going to work: spinners, spoons, jigs, swim baits. You could use those every year here, every time you come for the rest of your life, and your grandkids could use them, and the fish wouldn't catch on. They're pretty dumb. But keeping it simple, baits that we always have in our tackle box. Limestone Lures, he makes just like I think they're like 3.5 inch, the rib kicker swim baits. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Put the link below. Classic. Like you catch anything on those: pike, bass, muskie, walleye. I like the white ones. I'm always a sucker for a white swim bait.
If you use code Paddleheads at limestonelures.ca, you can save 10%.
Ooh, I'll put that below in the show notes. Hey, wait a second. I have a code for them too. Don't listen to them. Listen to me. Just kidding. No, but use code Paddleheads for sure. Or whatever the heck it was. Paddleheads 10. What?
Just paddleheads.
Okay. That's one bait that I would definitely use. And like you said, wacky worms, he makes a fantastic wacky worm. Actually, I just picked some up at CanCast, the bubblegum pink color. Oh, yeah. I love that color. For me, it's one of those colors when it's slightly cloudy out. I love it. I have so much confidence in that color, but he has tons of colors. Jeff's a super nice guy. If you like having a lot of baits like me, don't buy a lot of baits, but buy a lot of the ones that you're actually going to use. Like Adam said, you go buy so much random crap that you never use, right? Buy a lot of stuff that you will use and pick up some swim baits and some stick baits. And another bait that I really like from him, he has 6-inch worm. It's called a wink worm. That on a shaky head. Bottom. Yep. Shaky head, drop shot, anything like that. Really good worm. Catches fish anywhere. But yeah, so definitely check out Jeff. So let's get a little bit more into fishing. So we are talking about packing minimally. Is that hard for you guys?
I think at first it was. At first we wanted to bring 2 or 3 tackle boxes, and we did. But then you realize how much you don't use when you're out there. So you start planning ahead. You start getting familiar with some of the lakes that you're hitting, or at least the area. You know it's going to be very rocky, or, we're going to be fishing a lot of weeds. So you may go a little bit heavier on more of the weedless baits, more of the Texas rigs or spinner baits. Or if we know that we're going to be trolling a lot and we're looking for lake trout in the evening, we're going to be using more crankbaits. We're going to be making sure those are in the tackle box. So we definitely plan what species we're targeting, and we try and look at the lakes ahead of time and get an idea, especially we try and find out the color of it, either by satellite imagery or by watching other people's YouTube videos, trying to do research on the park to see, is it stained water? Is it clear water? What kind of colors should we be considering? So yeah, it takes some practice to not pack as much, because you definitely always want to pack more. You're just like, oh, what if they're going to eat this? What if they're biting this?
That's the hardest thing, looking at your tackle box going, what don't I want to bring? I want to bring everything.
I have the really bad habit of, I will forego other, not necessities, but
toilet paper.
But that's a necessity. No, I will forego other. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Luxuries.
But yeah, I would be almost willing to sacrifice a cook stove and just bring cold cuts and eat sandwiches or cold cans of chili if it meant I could bring an extra tray of lures. I really like experimenting. So oftentimes what we end up doing is we bring everything and we just, have a super loaded canoe or whatever, and we deal with the extra weight. But I often bring too many lures, and I recognize that. But at the same time, I really, really like we're here, when Jesse and I go camping, we enjoy camping, but primarily it's fishing. We're here for fishing. So we have what we need to be comfortable on site. We have a good rain suit. We have our hammocks. We have, all our stuff to be comfortable and to look after ourselves. And yes, we have a cook stove. I bring in some decent food in a cooler. It's heavier than what a lot of people may bring in. But then we also bring in, 4 rods each. And then we bring in tackle boxes and almost a quarter of the weight we're bringing in. Or if you consider the motor itself and the batteries and the filming gear and stuff that we bring in, it's about half of the stuff we're bringing into a place has to do with our love of fishing and not about the camping side of it. So the camping is our way to access it. But yeah, if you can whittle things down to pack lightly, will be way more beneficial and can enhance the overall experience if you are doing like adventure fishing or interior camping, whatever you want to call it there. If you can limit the amount of stuff you bring in, you will overall have a more enjoyable time, especially if you have to portage and carry your gear.
Yeah, and it'll also force you into using your baits in ways that you may not have thought of. Or just fishing them in different ways, maybe counting them down, letting them sink deeper. Working them slower. You start playing around a little bit more with those baits. And also with 2 people going, we're both targeting the same species of fish. Sometimes, I'll say, are you bringing spoons? Well, yeah, he's bringing spoons, so I'm not going to bother bringing any spoons. I've got a bunch of, extra wide gap hooks. Don't worry about the hooks, the worm hooks, We can trade that way and share gear that way. So that also helps keep the tackle down.
Yeah, I always bring a couple extra hooks, and Jesse brings extra Vision 110s, and we just split it. It's pretty fair.
You lug that tungsten back here? Wow.
Yeah, you know what? This is the second year we've gone for walleye here, and it always comes down, like you guys said, you end up using the same baits every time, and usually you'll catch fish on them. And for us, like today, I had 3 rods, Andrew had 3 rods. I had a small 3-inch swim bait on one rod. It stayed on the whole day. On the other rod, I had a snap jig with a 4-inch, white fluke on it. That stayed on all day. And then my other rod, I had a jerk bait on, and that stayed on all day. Like, you may switch the colors up, but like you don't need a lot. And you can pretty much, if you bring a few rods like us, you might only bring 1 rod when you go fishing. But I noticed most of us here, we like fishing. We have multiple rods with us. Every single guy, there's 5 guys here, right? Mm-hmm. But you have 3 presentations, 2 presentations, and you're just going to cycle through them at each spot. It's kind of like junk fishing. Like, shallow here, I'm going to chuck a little paddle tail, it gets a little deeper, fish a jerk bait. And you cycle through and you'll find the pattern that the fish are on, what they want. And then you can kind of figure out, how to tweak your presentation. But we watch all these like fishing videos and Bassmaster and stuff, and they're like, you have to have this specific jig head color with this sparkle and this size of paddle tail with this specific, sparkle count and all this stuff. It's like, fish up here don't care about that. Maybe on pressure lakes they do, but up here they don't. So bring a few colors. Like I like to have white. That's great. And then I have a natural color and maybe like a dark color, and that's it. You don't need to have like 13 different colors of everything. The fish don't really care, Mm-hmm. So yeah, you don't have to go crazy.
I don't know. After like musky fishing for a bit, I'm starting to think of my lures as tools. You hear some people say, sometimes you just got to close that gap. You got to close the gap between your bait and the fish. And all that is a matter of getting it to the right depth at the right speed. So I try and look at my bait sometimes, like, if I need to fish deep, do I have certain baits that I can at least present something deep? If I need to fish weeds, do I have a tool to get me into those weeds and to potentially pull a fish out? I'm not necessarily thinking like, are they going to be eating silverfish or goldfish? It's like, no, can I get to that depth? Do I have something that looks decent? And that's kind of how I narrow it down.
I am also the opinion that presentation is more important than what you're offering. So that is key. If you can present a poor bait well, your chances of catching a fish is a lot better than presenting a really great bait poorly.
Yes.
But something else that again, kind of on the similar line, if you want to talk about versatility, like Jesse was saying, what we've been using today, jigs, snap jigs, ball head jigs, swim jigs, with paddle tails, with flat worms, with different things, with versatility like that. If you I love don't get me wrong, I love fishing crankbaits. I was fishing a lot of them today. But if you wanted to pack super light, you can go out there and you can get some EWG hooks with some screw weights to the front of it. So that way you can rig something weedless if it's super weedy. You have a couple different weights of the weight you put in front of that. You can get some jig heads ranging from 1/16 ounce up to a ½ ounce. And then you get some soft plastics. And then for $50, let's say in total, which is, let's be honest, 3 crankbaits maybe, you now have enough gear of jigs and soft plastics and hooks in order to fish any lake almost as effectively, or if not more effectively, because those are the things we're throwing anyways. Those are the highest producing lures for this trip yet again, is fishing jigs and plastics.
Yeah, we that's what we ended up catching them on today too. So we're here with our good buddy Jake as well. He's very quietly managing the fire for us as we do the show. But,
Say hi.
Hello, everybody.
Jake's actually the one who showed us this lake in the first place. While we were out on the water, we were kind of experimenting. Jake was throwing crankbaits and I was throwing jigs, and you were trolling a crankbait, right, Ben?
Yes.
So we were all kind of trying different stuff. The crankbaits, Jake caught a couple bass on them in particular areas. So it was like, okay, well, this is not where we want to fish. And he switched away from the crankbaits and started throwing jig heads with craw style plastics on them, actually. And got a couple in the same spot. So I put the same thing on. I started getting bit. And so, yeah, we kind of through trial and error figured out once again, maybe we just started with the plastics and jig heads, but it's so much fun to experiment, right? Like you were saying earlier, Andrew, you want to come here, you got toys, you want to play with them, you want to try stuff out.
Of course,
but,
I spent money on them. I'm going to use them.
That's right. But once again, Old Faithful. And you guys, what were you putting on your jigs? Like what kind of plastics?
So we were fishing an assortment. So we had we were fishing some limestone. We had some Z-Man just for the durability of it. Because some of the smaller stuff I have for some like underspins and whatnot, I find they get tore up pretty quick. So I was fishing some Z-Man plastics on that.
The profile though, were they like minnow or like Ned style?
So we had a lot of minnow style. Yeah, that primarily minnow style that we were using. Got a lot of bites on that. Haven't put on ourselves a craw trailer, but that's awesome to know that you guys have been doing well.
But this is
funny
it,
you
right?
waited until the evening to let us know what you were catching. So.
But this is the thing with a place like this, right? Is we're all kind of throwing different stuff, and still they're we're getting bit. We're just obviously the jigs and the plastics work here, but it doesn't seem to matter much like what that profile looks like.
Again, this year, I think I mentioned it before on the podcast, I want to get better at, fishing jigs. It's not something that I did for a long time. I always threw crankbaits. I grew up casting crankbaits. That's what I did. So for me, seeing every time I go out, I've been forcing myself to use jigs every time I go out for whatever species I'm going for, because they work for everything, and I'm learning more and more and gaining way more confidence in them, and they work. So if you haven't used them in the past, watch some videos, learn some techniques. Like Adam and Ben were saying, YouTube is a wealth of knowledge, and learn a couple techniques on how to fish jigs effectively. And there's various types of jigs you can fish slightly differently on all of them. If you can start catching fish on those and build your confidence, they are one of the cheapest fishing tackle that you can use that is super effective.
I love talking about lures. We could do a whole podcast about it. But
We do.
oh yeah, we do that every week pretty much. Never mind. If you want to hear one of those, just listen to last week's podcast. But it's not every week that we have guests, and it's not every week or every guest that we have someone that does this kind of fishing, which is super cool. I know, like, we did a podcast last year with Radio Voice Royce. We recorded somewhere back in the wilderness as well, and we got a lot of people asking us like, oh, where were you guys? It's like, we're not going to tell you where we were. It's secret. But there's 250,000 lakes in Ontario. I'm sure you can find one of them yourself that you can fish and catch a bunch of fish on. But I thought we could talk just briefly about fishing gear, like rods and reels. And I feel like it's so simple. We talk about this all the time. We actually, on the podcast with the guys from the Fishing Canada show, remember we asked them if they could only have like one rod and reel. They said a 6.6 medium with a 2500 reel, spinning reel, and like braided line. That's literally what we've been using all day. When me and Andrew have been fishing today, a lot of medium light rods, extra fast tip, like that for walleye fishing, because it's light enough for, some of the finesse presentations that we've been using, like small jigs, like 1/8 ounce jigs. You need a medium light. Extra fast tip, very sensitive, a nice quick hook set when they grab it. But a few medium power rods as well for casting bigger stuff like crankbaits and stuff like that. But it doesn't have to be fancy. Literally, we're using 10-pound braid with 10-pound fluorocarbon leaders or 10-pound monofilament leaders. That's it. You can even use straight mono. You want to use 8 or 10-pound mono.
And this lake is the water is fairly clear, but it is also at the same time like tannic. So I've been fishing straight braid, and I have not. I was fishing with a fluoro leader for a time, but I noticed the knot was getting caught in the guides sometimes. So I just went straight braid to my jig, and I haven't noticed the fishing slow down. So even in stuff like that, it's you don't have to overcomplicate things.
On the topic of gear and rods, I think something that we've found, Ben and I, after doing this for a while, after breaking a few nice rods, is that for adventure fishing or backcountry camping and fishing, and this is, not sponsored, but ugly sticks are great because you can beat them up when the eyelets bend out because you drag them through the brush. You can bend them back. You don't have to worry about anything snapping. They've been essential for us, and we've not had one break on a trip ever.
Not a single one.
But I've broken a few other rods on other trips. So yeah, I would recommend if someone's looking to get into this kind of thing, don't buy the fanciest stuff. Buy something you're okay beating up because it's going to get beat up.
Yeah. Stuff is going to break. Stuff breaks when you're fishing not backcountry. If it's going to break, it's going to break when you're, slugging your stuff through the forest.
You ever fallen back on the boat and snapped a rod in half, or is that?
I had a buddy one time. It wasn't backcountry, but he was pulling his boat up to the dock, and he had all of his rods, like 4 of them, just laid up all together at the front near the trolling motor. And he went to jump up on the dock, and he slipped, and his knee crushed all his rods. I broke 4 of his rods, and they were like Loomises and stuff.
Ouch.
I could not laugh. I felt bad. I was just like, yeah. But yeah, that's good advice. And like I said before, when I worked at the fishing store, we sold hundreds of ugly sticks. Like when ugly sticks came in, they came in bundles. And you'd sell tons, 6, 7 foot mediums every day. On the weekend in the summertime, you'd sell dozens of them. It is crazy. And I very rarely, if ever got any come back. And if they did come back, it was because a guide popped out. The rod themselves never broke. So it's a great rod and great for trolling too, because they're a bit more limber. So you have a big fish grab your spoon or your spinner while you're trolling. The rod itself has a lot of give, so you don't have to worry about the hook tearing out of its mouth or the rod snapping. And
maybe you could fish for muskie with ugly sticks. You just crane them up, from the bottom.
Yeah,
I would do it.
Spring fishing. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, you get one of those ugly stick tiger surf rods. They're as thick as your wrist. They're only $49. They weigh 3 pounds. Another great rod that we've been using today, again, not a plug either, but we started trying out those new Daiwa Canadian custom rods. And they're about $120, so a little bit more. They are graphite, so they will snap if you step on them, yes. But they're not a super high-end rod, but they're 2-piece. The ones that we have, they're 2-piece. Actually, Andrew's a 1-piece. I have a 2-piece. But I can't really tell the 2-piece is nice. But they're just classic actions for Canada. A lot of walleye rods, a lot of bass rods, spinning rods. And this trip, we brought all spinning rods because we're walleye fishing. We do have bait casting, jerkbait rods for walleye and stuff, but it's nice to have just the spinning rod is a little more versatile, generally speaking. We're not going to get Andrew started on the BFS poop, but that's another episode. But anyway, to wrap it all up, we kind of went all over the place, but these are just naturally flowing conversations around the campfire. I hope you can hear that. Listen to this. I just melted my microphone. It's okay. But just to sum it all up, you don't need anything fancy. Again, we talked about things you need, a bunch of stuff. You need a canoe. You don't even need a nice canoe. You can have a canoe that has a little leak in it. That's fine. Get get a canoe, borrow a canoe from someone. Get a barrel. Get a cheap barrel. That's what I'm running. That's what Jake's running. Big barrel. I saw his barrel come off. It looked like something you'd hide a body in on a murder show. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I don't know Jake that well. But just get a barrel, get a dry bag, get a sleeping bag, get a hammock. You can buy a budget hammock off Amazon if you need to. Just get out there.
That's what I did.
Yeah, that's what I did too. If you're just starting out, you don't have to spend a bundle. Fishing stuff, keep it simple. Like Adam and Ben said, you don't need anything crazy. We're going to end this episode with just any words of advice or inspiration. If someone's thinking about doing backcountry and they've never done it before, what is one advice each of you would like to give this person listening.
I would say that, and I think I kind of touched on this earlier, but as much as possible and as many people as possible, everyone should have an opportunity to experience something like this. Camping, sleeping outside, and fishing at a place like, like you said, it's really about the fishing. But to have this type of experience, that's our goal as Paddleheads, is to encourage people to do this kind of thing, even if it's just once, just to try it, because it is a unique experience. You're away from the crowds. You're not on the big lakes. It is kind of a special thing. So yeah, how do I turn that into like some inspirational advice? Here you go, Ben.
I would say that if you're going to give it a go, understand your first time is probably going to be difficult. You may run into some situations that may get really tough. You may think in the moment that you don't want to do this again, but just wait till you're done, wait till you get home and reflect on it. You'll probably want to go out again and just understand it's going to get easier. The more you do it, the more you'll learn, the easier it will get, and the more enjoyable it will be.
Wow. Oh my
well
goodness.
said.
Couldn't have. Wow. that
Vote
was
for
good.
Ben for president.
One thing that I would say is, again, just to reiterate the fact that there are things that you will look back on and enjoy, and I'm sure everyone here on this campfire is going to look at me with a really weird face when I say this, but one of the best noises to fall asleep to is 1,000 mosquitoes outside your tent, not inside, outside your tent. And you get over the fact that there's like a bunch of parasitic, blood-sucking, like little Apache helicopters, like flying through the woods to eat your face off. You get past that, and you're backcountry, and you nestle into your warm sleeping bag, and you zip up that little tent or your hammock, and you get the bug net around you, and you just hear that warm, like this low. Sometimes low, sometimes a high-pitched, like, buzzing noise. Yeah. And to me, it's like, that's actually a really great white noise machine. And I really appreciate that. When I'm in the tent and all those things are outside, I appreciate that noise to help me fall asleep.
Unfortunately, the white noise that we have to listen to after is Andrew snoring all night long. He's a bad snorer. You guys are going to hear it tonight.
Or you'll probably go out too.
You and me both, Andrew. You and me both.
That's why Adam and I's hammocks are pretty close to each other.
That's right. We're in the back, hidden away from everyone.
I actually have extra earplugs, just so everybody knows. If
Oh.
you want some earplugs
Yeah.
tonight, I do have some.
Absolutely, yes. So, where can we find you guys?
YouTube, Paddleheads, at Paddleheads, Instagram,
Yeah.
TikTok, Facebook.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Just YouTube's our main focus, though. That's our main
Yes,
content.
that is our primary focus. So our YouTube channel is where we.
And we do have 3 channels, just to try and clear things up. We have Paddleheads, which is just about adventure fishing, showing you everything about adventure fishing, how to do it, some of the gear we use, and some of the cool people we meet. And then there's Paddleheads Adventure Fishing, where we show the trips that we go on and the different fishing adventures we do. And then there's Quiet Wilderness Fishing, too.
That's right. We have Quiet Wilderness Fishing for the people who. Well, the original name was Shut Up and Fish. That was going to be the channel name. We thought, we're trying to reach a broader audience. Let's keep it quiet. And so, that's the idea. Is no talking, just shh and fish.
And for anyone who actually has met these guys, you realize that last channel isn't doing so. No, I'm just kidding.
It's really hard for us to make.
These guys are blast. Again, this is our third time camping with them on this lake, and we always have a blast when you come here. And I also want to give another shout out to Jake, the Canadian Shield man. He has been lovingly tending this fire that we've been sitting around the entire podcast, breaking twigs and throwing them on that fire. So big shout out to him for keeping that going, keeping us warm.
Thanks, Jake.
Actually, I thought that we would give Jake the honor of giving us the quote of the week at the end of this episode. So start
Oh.
thinking now. So a little bit of housekeeping. A little bit of housekeeping. You should see this guy's
Yeah, his
eyes
face.
just glazed over. So anyway, we got a little bit of housekeeping. we'd like to thank everyone for listening to every episode. We're actually at the point where we're getting a few thousand downloads every single episode, which is absolutely fantastic. Never thought we'd get this far. Really cool. Again, we'd like to make sure that you guys listen to some of our latest episodes if you haven't, especially the one with the guys from the Fishing Canada show. That was really a privilege to be on their show, as well as having them on our show as well. We'd like to thank also our Patreon members who donate a few bucks every month to help cover the cost so that me and Andrew, the poor boys of the AOA, don't have to pay out of our own pockets. We do really appreciate you guys doing that as well. You get entered in all the monthly giveaways as well. So we're going to end this episode with Jake, the Canadian Shield Man, who's a muskie man. He's going to give us the quote of the week.
If you're fishing a new lake, don't get discouraged by getting skunked. Every day you're out there, you're learning something new, and all you can do is learn from your mistakes and get better.
That was like super inspirational, and it wasn't like kooky at
Bravo.
all. Hooray!